All right, so I can see you found the appraisal math portion of this. So we're going to just start off using the PowerPoint slides for this appraisal point with this appraisal math. I'm going to have the slides available for viewing while you're doing it. I'll also put them in the handouts portion if you want to look at them that way too. But just a few of them. It's more or less a review. There isn't really any more new thought that I'm introducing with these. And then we're going to have a front and back handout or a two-page handout going through more of these type of math questions. So looking at this first one, we see that we have 3 apartments that rent for $450 per month, 3 for $500 per month, 2 for $550 per month. There's a 5% vacancy rate, $300 in monthly expenses, $125 a month in additional income. The owner wants a 10% return on her investment, or we could also say cap rate. How much can she pay for the property? How much can she pay for the property? So let's do this one together. If you want, you can go back when I had the slide on the screen and just press pause and try and figure it out on your own. Or you can watch me as we do these. Either way would be fine. Now, of course, when we get to the math handout portion, I want you to do that sheet in its entirety or follow the directions I give and then watch me as I give you the answers. The more competent you get in answering these questions, the better you're going to be equipped when it comes to passing that exam. So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out my PGI, my potential gross income. And I do that by figuring up my rents. So I have 3 units at $450 per month times 12 months. I have 3 units at $500 per month times 12 months. And I have 2 units at $550 per month times 12 months. I've said this already, but one of the things I love about math is that there's lots of different ways you can come up with these answers. So as you can see, I'm making these into an annual answer. In other words, I'm taking it times the 12 months so I can figure out my annual number. When I get my answers, I'm going to add all of them up together, and I'm going to have my total PGI, which I'm going to put up here. What you could do, and maybe you did if you did press pause and work this on your own, you could take the 3 units times the 450, 3 times 500, 2 times 550, added them all up, and then took it times 12 as a whole, and you would have gotten the same answer that I'm going to get. And there might be another way as well. So when I add these up, or when I take the 3 units times the 450 per month times the 12 months, I get 16,200. The next one, 3 times 500 times 12, I'm going to get 18,000. And finally, 2 times 550 times 12, I get 13,200. When I add all those up, I should get 47,400. And that's my PGI. $47,400. The next thing that I do, and like I said back in the chapter 17, there's 2 different methods. You may see, again, method 2, where they add the income to the PGI and then subtract out the vacancy rate, but I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to subtract out the vacancy rate first, and then I'm going to add the additional income and take out the expenses. So my vacancy rate is 5%. So is 5%, so I'm going to subtract out that vacancy rate. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do this. You can take 47,400 times 5%, and then whatever that answer is, you would take that answer and then subtract it from 47,400. That's a two-step process. The calculators that we use here, you simply take the 47,400, and I push the minus button, then I push 5, it's 5%, 5, push the button 5, then I push the percent button, which is 2 buttons above the divide sign, or divide button, and then that gives me an answer of 2,370, so that's 5% of 47,400. Then I hit equals, and that gives me $45,030. $45,030. And then I'm going to add my additional income, so once I subtract out that vacancy rate, I get $45,030. Now I need to figure out my additional income and my monthly expenses. Well, my monthly expenses in that paragraph are $300 per month. So 300 times 12 months equals $3,600. And I'll just write to the side, these are my expenses. With my income, I have $125 per month. So I take that times 12, and I get $1,500. And that's income. So I'm going to add the $1,500 income, which gives me $46,530. And this is my effective gross income, my EGI. And then I'm going to subtract my $3,600 in expenses, and I'll get $42,930. $42,930. That's my NOI, my net operating income. $42,930. Now, if I would have done it method 2, instead of $42,930, I would have come up with $42,855. So I'm like, what, $75 off? So it's not a substantial number. It's not enough to get you a wrong answer on the test, like I mentioned earlier. But in my opinion, this is a more accurate number. You may have a different opinion, and that's just fine. But the question isn't finished yet. It says that she wants a 10% return on her money. So what are we going to do then, going back to chapter 17, and then what we've also discussed when we look at cap rates? What are we going to do to figure out what she should pay for the property? If she wants a 10% rate of return, so 10% rate of return, or cap rate, we already know the NOI is $42,930. We're going to divide, right? Going up and down using that formula. So we take the $42,930, hit the divide button on the calculator, put in 10%, and we get $429,300. So that's the answer to this first one. Slide number 2 is going to talk about capital gains. And we've looked at capital gains back in chapter 16. So this is a bit of a review. But there is, again, a necessity for you to understand this. And capital gains, remember, it's kind of the example I gave back in 16, I'm just really trying to figure out what my net is, in a sense. And so they're going to throw in a little bit extra on this math one. Remember capital gains before, we had a house that we bought back in like 92, or we bought it for 92,000, something like that. They put on a bonus room, or they added a sunroom, and then they sold it for X. And so now we got to figure out our capital gains. Same thing here, except we're going to add in a realtor commission. So let's look at the slide. Harry purchased the property for $90,000. He made $225,000 worth of improvements. 3 years later, he sold the property for $130,000 and paid a 6% commission. What were his capital gains on the sale? So he paid a 6% commission. Like I said, we're going to throw in an extra variable here, but the process is still going to be the same. So first off, step number one, we take this original investment of $90,000. So let's just write up here, this is for capital gains. $90,000 is the original investment. We add the $22,000 or $22,500 improvement, and this gives us $112,500. What does this number represent? What is the word that they call this? You could see it on test. This number here is the basis, or they call it the adjusted basis. And so this adjusted basis of $112,500 is going to be used at the very end, or the fourth step, when we figure out our final capital gain. So we got our adjusted basis. That's step one. Step two, we're going to take and figure out the commission. So the house sold for $130,000, and I can use the ERV formula for that if I like. Otherwise, you can just use simple math, because I just need to find 6% of $130,000, and I get $7,800. So that's step two. That's my commission. Next, I'm going to take my $130,000 sale price, subtract out the commission of $7,800, and I'll get $122,200. And this is my adjusted net. So that's my adjusted net. So I take my $122,200, my adjusted net, and I subtract out my adjusted basis of $112,500, and I come up with $9,700 in capital gains. So $9,700 is what my capital gains are. Remember those limits? $500,000 in capital gains if you file jointly, $250,000 if you file single. And so there's just an extra step when we look at this commission being added into this equation, as opposed to before we didn't have it. Now what you could have done with a calculator like we have here, instead of going through this step two, you could have just plugged in $130,000, then pushed the minus button, then pushed 6%, or 6, then the percent button, and hit equals And you would have gotten that number right off the bat. But it would have eliminated a few steps. Either way, again, with math, just so you come up with the right answer, that's what I want. So, and then lastly, we're going to look at appreciation and depreciation. So let's look at our slide. Appreciation, we have Mr. and Mrs. homeowner purchased or paid $80,000 for their property. This year, their home appreciated 10%. What is the value of the home today? So this year, their property went up 80%. What's the value of their home today? So let's look at this up on the board. They paid $80,000. And it says that the house has gone up 10%. So we can just say that it's went up in value by 10%. So what does that equal? There's a couple different ways you can do this. You could take the 80,000 times 10% and you get 8,000. And then you can add that 8,000 to the original 80,000 and you'll get 88,000. You can use those calculators that we have here, a calculator that you may have that has the function where you can just punch in $80,000 plus 10% equals, and you'll get the right answer. You can also take, if you remember back to that net listing where we had the 100% number and we would subtract off from that. Well, here we're appreciating, we're going up. So I take the, well, let's do it over here. I take 100% plus 10%. 100% here represents my 80,000. So I get 110%. So 80,000 times 110%, or it's 1.10 on your calculator, and you'll get the 88,000. So 3 different ways. There could be a fourth. Depreciation. It says that Mr. and Mrs. homeowner paid $80,000 for their property. This year their property depreciated by 10% in value. What is the value of their property? So now we can really apply the same thought process, except instead of appreciation we're going into depreciation. So we're going to subtract out 10%. So again, we can take the 80,000 times the 10%, which is 8,000 again, and then we take the 80,000 and then subtract out the 8,000, and we get 7,200. I'm sorry, $72,000. Going back to that 100% number, the 80,000 is that 100%, and so we're going to subtract out 10%, which gives us 90%. So if I took the $80,000 times 90%, I'd get the same number too, 72,000. And lastly, if I just took my calculator and I took 80,000 minus 10%, I'm going to get 72,000. So that's the end for this, and then we're going to look at some math. Appraisal questions, or appraisal math. Your sheet's going to look a little bit like this. I mean, obviously your answers aren't going to be filled out yet if you haven't started. But how I work this in class, and how I want to do this with you, is that you'll see that it's broken down. these 2 pages, whether you print it off or you have it in the front and back or 2 separate pages. You should have gotten this in a handout with your 3-ring binder. If you don't have it, it's online as well. But long story short, you'll see I have part 1, then I have part 2, and then the 3rd page or 2nd page is part 3. And so I have the class do part 1, and then we'll go through it together as a group. And then they do part 2, go through it together as a group, and then part 3. And so that's kind of how I'm going to teach it. Although I'll just have a little blurb, just kind of separating out the 3. So if you want to just go right through all of them, you sure can. And then just watch the video in continuation. What you're going to do now is begin with part 1. When you're finished, you'll hit play again and watch me go through questions 1 through 4 up on the board. And then part 2. All right, so Appraisal Math, part 1, questions 1 through 4. I wrote out the answers up on the board. And so there is a little bit of trick to some of these. Numbers 2 and 4 can be a little tricky, but they're really good examples for, or all of these are, for helping you with your final exams. So let's look at number 1, okay? Number 1 says, last year Sammy's 14-unit building had an effective gross income, or EGI, and you can look back at chapter 17 if you want to reference what that is, of $62,000. Expenses were $6,000 and a cap rate of 7%. What is the value? So pay close attention, because on this, I kind of just, I didn't skip any steps, but I just incorporated the formula right away with the answer. So the $62,000 is the EGI, the $6,000 is the expenses, right? So we're going to subtract that out, and that gives us the NOI, remember? The net operating income. And then the next question is, what if the cap rate's 7%, what's the value? Well, here's our cap rate, 7%. We need to figure out what the value is, and if you see what I did, is I just, below the 56,000, I put my little formula below that. And now that I drew over it, might even be more confusing, but I put my NOI at the top, my income, and then I divide that by my 7%, because I'm going from top to bottom. And then I get $800,000, or C is my answer for that one. Number 2, and I'm going to leave this up here so you can press pause and look at it. Number 2, 3 years ago, Brent paid $70,000 for his ranch home. The home has appreciated at 4% each year. What is the value of the property today? So the tendency is to take it either plus 12%, 3 years at 4% each year, so 3 times 4 is 12, and that's your answer, which your answer may be on there, but it's not the right answer. So we got to look at this as kind of compounding. So each year it goes up by 4%. And so that's what I've done here. The first year, it's at $70,000. We add 4%. So for year 2, we have $72,000. We add 4%. And so then we continue on. And then finally, we have the number $78,740. Make sure that you add the 4%, which I did 3 times, because it's gone up 3 years. So make sure that you add that 4% 3 times, and don't just take it times 3 for 3 years and just add it by 12%, because you're going to get the wrong number. Now, number 3, you'll see that we have an apartment building with a $150,000 net operating income, my NOI, just like I had NOI over here. So I have $150,000 net operating income, and a cap rate of 9.5%, which I have right there. Remember, I, which is income, right there, rate, and value. So the question is what is the value? Or it has a value of what? So we're going from top to bottom. We have the 150,000. We have the 9.5%. We're going to divide. So we put $150,000 in the calculator. We push the divide button. We put in 9.5%. Hit the equal button. And we should get $1,578,000. 947. And finally, number 4. Number 4 is similar to number 2. 2 years ago, Sarah paid $210,000 for her house. Since then, her house has depreciated 6% each year. What is it worth today? So it's gone down in value by 6%. So $210,000, we subtract 6% out, $197,000. So for the second year, we do another 6%. And so then today, it's worth $185,556, or B. So now begin working on part 2, and then we'll go through the answers again on the board. Okay, so part 2 on this appraisal math or appraisal questions, we're going to look at number 5. It says an apartment building has a semi-annual net income of $36,000. So twice a year, that's the net income, and has a value of $1.2 million. What is the cap rate? So if you would figure that the $36,000 is a representation of the income, you're pretty right. It is. But it's the semi-annual income. So if I just put $36,000 in my T formula, I'm going to get the wrong number because that's not an annual number. That's a semi-annual number. So I have to take the $36,000, times it by 2 so I can figure out my annual number, and I get $72,000. Then you'll see down here I take the $72,000 and put it into my formula, and I divide because I'm going up and down. So 72,000 divide 1.2 million, and I get 6%. Formula is pretty slick. And that's a cap rate question. That's a very common question you'll see on an exam. Number 6, 20 years ago, John and Jane paid $120,000 for their property. During that time, they finished off the basement, plus they put another $5,000 worth of improvements. They recently sold it for $275,000, paid their realtor a 7% commission. What capital gains can they exclude? Or we could say, what's their capital gains? A little bit lengthy problem, but nonetheless, up at the top, first we're going to figure out what the adjusted basis is, and we do that by taking the original purchase price plus improvements. And I said in class when we were on that chapter that the improvements are kind of going to be along the lines of adding square footage. So if I added a 3rd stall, if I finished off the unfinished basement, so I added an extra living room, a bathroom, and 2 more bedrooms. If I put on a bonus room or a sunroom, that's going to be deemed improvements that you can add into for your adjusted basis. If it's something like repairing a roof or repainting the house, that's due to normal wear and tear. It's not going to qualify. And I know they have that number of $5,000, it says, worth of other improvements. Since they don't tell us what it is, we just have to assume that it's going to go into this problem. So I take the 120 and I add the 32,500 plus the 5,000, and I get an adjusted basis of 157,500. And then like before, we have a commission. And I get to take that commission out. So I eliminated a step because of my calculator here. Instead of taking the 7% commission times the $275,000 sale price and then what I would get is 19,250, and then subtracting that from the 275,000, and then finally getting to the number of 255,750. What I did is I just put in my calculator 275,000 as my sold price, subtract or minus 7%, and then I got 255,750. That's my adjusted net. Now I take my adjusted basis and subtract it. You'll see 157,500, and I get a capital gain of 98,250, or letter D, for my answer. And then finally, number 7 says I have a commercial building with the semi-annual effective gross income of 310,000. Since the annual expenses are 20% of the effective gross income, the net operating income is, well, the answer is 496,000, or A. So how I got there is, it's a little bit like this one over here, number 5. We're at a semi-annual income, so I have to take it times 2. So that's my $620,000. And then my expenses are always going to have to be subtracted. So what I could do is I could hit minus 20% and come up with the answer. But here I'm just going to take 620,000 times the 20%. That's my expenses, $124,000. So I subtract the 124,000 from the 620, and I get 496. Again, I could just take the $620,000 and then push the minus button on my calculator, hit 20% equals, and I would still come up with the 496. But I just took an extra step here just for explanation's sake. So now you may begin on part 3, and then we'll go through those answers. Okay, so for us to finish out part 3 on this appraisal math, I'm going to take up 2 separate boards. So I'm going to go through 8, 9, and 10, and then I'll do 11 and 12. But I want to make sure that I get everything explained to you instead of condensing or making the numbers smaller, so that you can have an easier time reading it and getting the material. So number 8, the replacement cost of a building is $350,000. Has an annual depreciation of 6%, a site value of $50,000, and taxes are $4,500. What is the value of the property? Now, you're going to have to go back and remember about depreciation, because not everything depreciates. Okay? So look up here on the board with me, number 8. My replacement cost is $350,000. I'm going to subtract out the 6%, which I can do with my calculator, or I can take it times 6%, which gives me 21,000, and then I subtract 21,000 from 350,000. Regardless, I'm going to get 329,000. I'm going to add in the site value of the property. The site value is another way of saying the land. I can't depreciate land, right? So all I can subtract the 6% off is the 350. Once I get that number, I add in my land, and now I have the $379,000 value of the property. The taxes are just thrown in there to goof you up. They don't apply. Number 9, a little bit lengthy, but I have 4 apartments that rent for $450 per month, and 4 others for $600 per month. There's an 8% vacancy rate and monthly expenses of $200. If the buyer decides or desires an 8% cap rate or rate of return, what should he pay? So, looking at this problem, I first want to figure out my PGI, my potential gross income, which is my total rents for the year. So I take the 4 units times the 450 times 12 months, 4 units at $600 times 12 months, and then I add those 2 together, I get $50,400. Then I subtract out my 8% vacancy rate, and I get $46,368. Now, I did that again with my calculator like I did problem number 8 over here, just by subtracting 8% or pushing those buttons on my calculator. I can do it the longer way, again, and take it times 8% and then subtract out the answer from 50,400. Either way, I'm still going to get this $46,368 number. Once I get that, I subtract, this is my EGI, and I subtract my expenses. Well, they're $200 a month. I want to make it an annual number, remember. So I take that times 12, I get $2,400. I subtract it, I get $43,968. That's my net operating income, or my NOI. And so I'm going to use my T formula here, put that on top. It's my annual number. They want an 8% rate of return, or cap rate. And when I divide, because I'm going from top to bottom, I'm going to get answer D, which is $549,600. And then finally, number 10. Property is currently worth $190,500 if it has depreciated or gone down in value of 5% each year for the last 2 years. What was the original investment? So as we continue to do this math, you're going to see some of these things repeating themselves, and hopefully it's starting to sink in. So you see how time and time again we're using the IRV formula or the T formula. Another thing that we're reusing is what we learned, I think it was back in part 2 of our video series, chapters 8 or 9, when we looked at the net listing. And we had to figure out the net listing where we had our 100% number and we subtracted the commission, and then we ended up dividing our net by that to get the list price. So we're going to do here. We're going to take our 100% number and subtract out the 5%. This is our unknown. We subtract out the 5%, we get 95%. So it started off at $190,500, but it's depreciated over the last 2 years. So we divide that by 95%. And we get $200,526. Now we take that number and plop it right here, and we go through the same procedure, dividing, and we get our answer of $211,080. Now a couple things. One, the beauty of math is, and multiple choice, is that you have the answers right with multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. Why not just work it back in? If you get stuck and you don't know to subtract the 5% and yada, 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 why don't you just start with answer number A, or answer letter A, which is $171,450. And so what I would do is, if it's depreciated in 5% each year, and it was worth $190,500, then I could take answer A, which is $171,450, and I would subtract 5%, get an answer, then I'd subtract 5% from that. Well, I can already tell you I'm going the wrong direction, because answer A, which is $171,450, is already less than the current property value of $190,500. So it's either going to be answer B or answer D, 210 or 211,000. And so if I would take those numbers and work it backwards, I could come up with the answer. But the reason why I'm doing it this way with 100% is because if I was to take 191,000, and if it's depreciated 5,000 each year for the past 2 years, what was the original investment? So if after 2 years now I'm sitting with only 190,500, but where was I at 2 years ago? And I decided, well, I'm going to add 5% to 190,500, get my answer, then add another 5% to that new answer, and I should end up with one of these. And you might have, but it's the wrong answer. Why? Because you're taking 5% of the 190,500. And that's not how the question reads. The question says, off of this number, she's lost or they've lost 5%. So it's 5% off this number, which we don't know. That's the unknown, or we could say that's the 100% number. Hopefully that starts to click. Because if I, again, remember our net listing? And let's just do this real on an easy level. Remember the net listing. It said that if the seller needs to net $100,000 and your commission is 6%, what do you list the property at? And if you just simply added or took 6% of $100,000 and then added it to the $100,000, which is $100,000 plus 6%, you'd get $106,000. And you'd get the wrong answer. What you need to do is, again, start with the 100% and subtract the 6%, which gives you 94%. Then you divide the 100,000 by that. Why? Because when you do, let's do this with my calculator. Let's take 100,000 and I'm going to divide by 94%. And I get $106,382. So there's an extra $382 on there when I go that route. But let's look at the end result. I listed at $106,382. I sell it at that, and then I have to pay out the 6% commission. So let's subtract 6% off of that. And now I end up with $100,000. Again, it's 6%, or in this case, 5% of the end number. So please remember that. And it's going to help you greatly. So now we'll finish out with 11 and 12. So to wrap up this appraisal math, I have 11 and 12 on the board. So number 11 says the rent collected in a 10-unit apartment building is as follows. $500 for 3 units, $550 for the other 3, and $600 for 3 apartments. Now, first off, you're thinking, well, that's 3, 6, 9 units. Where's the last one? Doesn't matter. Okay? So just like our settlement statement, there's going to be things on there, if you're really analytical, it's going to bug you. And I understand that. But when it comes to these questions, you just have to take them at face value. And if they're giving you the values for 3, don't stress out about the missing one. Let's say that it was converted into the laundromat. That's where they're getting this $3,000 of income. So let's use that. Let's pretend to give you some peace of mind. So there's a vacancy rate of 7%. Additional income off the laundromat is $3,000 per year. And our annual expenses are $5,500 on an annual basis. If the cap rate is 11%, how much should the buyer pay for this property? So first things first, we're gonna figure out our PGI, potential gross income. Take all the rents, convert them into an annual number, and add $59,400 is your total. Subtract out the vacancy rate, 7%, that gives us $55,242. We're going to add the annual income of $3,000. We could, if you wanted to, you could subtract first the expenses and then add the income. You're still going to come up with the same number. But in this example, we're adding the $3,000 first because I'm more of the half glass full. I like the positive news first. Let's do that. Then we'll subtract the $5,500. Regardless, you're going to get your NOI, your net operating income, of $52,742. Now we're going to put that in our T formula. It said the 11% is going to be the rate of return, or cap rate. We divide, because we're going from top to bottom, and you're going to get $479,472 for a value or purchase price on this property. Number 12, Larry entered into a 12-year graduated lease with the owner of a building. He agreed to pay $400 per year for the first 4 years, $450 for the next 4 years, and $500 for the remaining term. If the property manager is paid 6% of the total rent he collected, how much will he be paid at the end of the leasing term? This one is more of a, I'd say, beginner to intermediate / question. And so on your test, your exams, you're going to have, on the national one, you're going to have 10% of it as math. We've already laid that out. You'll have about a third of it beginner, a third of it intermediate, and a third of it advanced. And so this is going to be that beginner to intermediate type level. And this actually is more of an intermediate to advanced type question. So if you're doing good on those, you can give yourself a pat on the back. So Larry is in this lease, and at the end of the 12-year term, he's going to pay $64,800 in rent. The property manager gets 6% of that. So this is how much the property manager is going to make at the end of that 12-year graduated lease. So I hope you enjoyed this math. If you didn't, I understand, because math isn't everybody's favorite subject. But this and the other math that we do either online or in class is just there to prepare you for those exams. And you'll be able to, again, take a calculator in there with you on the exams, so you don't have to do it all on scratch paper. But if you have questions between now and class time or during class time, never hesitate to let us know, and we'll see how we can help you. Thank you.